I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist or sexist or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. What the hell? We come through this whole winter without never having a single snowstorm, and then also, oh, god damn it. All right, take a seat, little idiot. I was just talking about how here in Minnesota, we've had no snow pretty much all winter because of El Nino and also global warming, that there's just been no snow. It's been like 50 degrees all winter long, which is pretty rare for us. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I haven't had to shovel once. I love it. Thank God for us destroying the planet because things are going so great for me. But then all of a sudden now we got a big snowstorm coming. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week we're going to finish reading Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. Want to learn about the author? I took the time to steal this from Wikipedia. Emily Brontë, born July 30th, 1818, and died December 19th, 1848, was an English novelist and poet who is best known for her only novel, Wuthering Heights, now considered a classic of English literature. She also published a book of poetry with her sisters, Charlotte and Anne, titled Poems of Kerr, Ellis, and Acton Bell, with her only poems finding regard as poetic genius. She died of tuberculosis, most likely caused from runoff water from a nearby graveyard. Want to hear some fun facts? Sure, I stole this from thecollector.com. Charlotte Brontë turned down multiple marriage proposals and was obsessed with her former professor. The first proposal came from Henry Nussey, the brother of Charlotte Bronte's friend Ellen, in 1839. In a letter explaining to Ellen that her refusal, Charlotte wrote, "I asked myself two questions. Do I love Henry Nussey as much as a woman ought to love her husband? Am I the person best qualified to make him happy?" As Ellen, my conscience, answered no to both these questions. The rejected proposal did not cause ill will. Henry went on to marry another woman, and Charlotte and Ellen remained lifelong friends and confidants. The second proposal came from David Price, a former curate of Charlotte's father, later that same year. Her refusal may have prevented some amount of future heartache. David Price died just 1 year later. In 1842 and 1843, Emily and Charlotte attended a French language school in Brussels, hoping to establish their own school in the future. This plan never came to fruition, and Charlotte returned home to England with something else to hold on to, an obsession with her professor, Constantine Hager. Whatever. Charlotte wrote him increasingly desperate emotional letters between 1844 and 1845, begging him to respond. She claimed she could not sleep without being tormented by dreams of him and would, quote, rather undergo the greatest bodily pains than lose her master's friendship and interest. After requesting that Charlotte stop writing, Hager tore the letters to pieces. His wife reportedly retrieved the amended letters. So there you go. There's that. Thank God for the grandfather clock. Let's go downstairs and read this story. Well, there you go. Why don't you get yourself seated? Chapter 32. 1802. This September, I was invited to devastate the moors of a friend in the north, and on my journey to his abode, I unexpectedly came within 15 miles of Gimmerton. The ostler at the roadside public house was holding a pail of water to refresh my horses when a cart of very green oats, newly reaped, passed by, and he remarked, "Yon frog Gimmerton, nah, there alas 3 wick, after other folk wi' their harvest." Barely understood what that said. "Gimmerton," I repeated. My residence in the locality had already grown dim and dreamy. I know. Oh, how far is it from this?" "Half 14 mile o'er the hills, and a rough road," he answered. Well, a sudden impulse seized me to visit Thrushcross Grange. It was scarcely noon, and I conceived that I might be as well pass the night under my own roof as in the inn. Besides, I could spare a day easily to arrange matters with my landlord, and thus save myself the trouble of invading the neighborhood again. Having rested a while, I directed my servant to inquire the way to the village, and, with great fatigue, to our beasts, we managed the distance in some, 3 hours. I left him there and proceeded down the valley alone. The gray church looked grayer, and the lonely churchyard, lonelier. I distinguished more sheep cropping the short turf on the graves. Sweet, warm weather, too warm for traveling, but the heat did not hinder me from enjoying the delightful scenery above and below. Had I seen it near August, I'm sure it would have tempted me to waste a month among its solitudes. In winter, nothing more dreary. In summer, nothing more divine than those glens shut in by hills and those bluff, bold swells of heath. I reached the Grange before sunset and knocked for admittance, but the family had retreated back to the premises, and I judged by one thin blue wreath curling from the kitchen chimney, and they did not hear. I rode into the court. Under the porch, a girl of 9 or 10 sat knitting, and an old woman reclined on the house steps, smoking a meditative pipe. "Is Miss Dean within?" I demanded of the dame. "Mistress Dean? Nay," she answered. "She doesn't bide here. Shoes up the heights." "Are you the housekeeper, then?" I continued. "Keep the hawse," she replied. "Well, I'm Mr. Lockwood, the master. Are there any rooms to lodge me in, I wonder? I wish to stay the night." Just the letter T. "Maester," she cried in astonishment, whoever knew ya were coming, ya sud ha send word. There's nout norther dry nor mensful abat to place now there ain't." I hate this. She drew down her pipe and bustled in. The girl followed, and I entered too. And soon perceiving that her report was true, and moreover, that I had almost upset her wits by my unwelcome apparition, I bade her to be composed. I should go out for a walk, and meantime she must try to prepare a corner of the sitting room for me to sup in, and a bedroom to sleep in. No sweeping and dusting, only fire and dry sheets were necessary. She seemed willing to do her best, though she thrust the hearth brush into the grates in mistake for the poker, and malappropriated several other articles of her craft. But I retired, confiding in her energy for a resting place against my return. Wuthering Heights was the goal of my proposed excursion. An afterthought brought me back when I had quitted the court. "All well at the Heights?" I inquired of the woman. That's EEA. F''R. Fru, out na, she answered, scurrying away with a pan of hot cinders. I should have asked why Mrs. Dean had deserted the Grange, but it is impossible to delay her at such a crisis, so I turned away and made my exit, rambling leisurely along with the glow of a sinking sun behind and the mild glory of a rising moon in front, one fading and the other brightening as I quitted the park and climbed the stony by-road branching off Mr. Heathcliff's dwelling. Before I arrived in sight of it, all that remained of day was a beamless amber light along the west. But I could see every pebble on the path and every blade of grass by that splendid moon. I had neither to climb the gate nor to knock. It yielded to my hand. That was an improvement, I thought. And I noticed another. By aid of my nostrils, a fragrance of stocks and wallflowers wafted in from the air amongst the homely fruit trees. Both doors and lattices were open, and yet, as is usually the case in a coal district, a fine red fire illuminated the chimney. A comfort which the eye derives from it renders the extra heat endurable. But the house of Wuthering Heights is so large that the intimates had plenty of space for withdrawing out of its influence, and accordingly, what intimates there were had stationed themselves not far from the windows, and I could see both of them and hear them talk before I entered, and looked and listened in consequence, pervert, being moved therethrough by a mingled sense of curiosity and envy that grew as I lingered. "Contrary," said a voice, as sweet as a silver bell. "That for the third time, you dunce. I'm not going to tell you again. Recollect, or I'll pull your hair." "Contrary, then," answered another, deep but softened tones. "Now kiss me, for minding so well." "Now, read it over first correctly, without a single mistake." The male speaker began to read. He was a young man, respectably dressed and seated at a table, having a book before him. His handsome features glowed with pleasure, and his eyes kept impatiently wandering from the page to a small white hand over his shoulder, which recalled him by a smart slap on the cheek. Whenever his owner detected such signs of inattention, its owner stood behind, her light, shining ringlets blending at intervals with his brown locks as she bent to superintend his studies. Oh, and her face. It was lucky he could not see her face, or he would have been so steady. I bit my lip in spite, and having thrown away the chance I might have had of doing something besides staring at his smiting beauty. Oh, he didn't actually, so he's coming back later, and he didn't actually marry her. Last we left off, I thought he was like, that's it, he's trying to swoop in. He's going to try and marry this incredibly young woman. But he didn't, and now he's pissed that he didn't. The task was done, not free from further blunders, but the pupil claimed a reward and received at least 5 kisses, which, however, he generously returned. And then they came to the door, and from their conversation, I judged that they were about to issue out and have a walk on the moors. And I supposed it should be condemned in Hareton Ershaw's heart, if not by his mouth, to the lowest pit of the infernal regions, of which I showed my unfortunate person in this neighborhood then. And feeling very mean and malignant, I skulked around to seek refuge in the kitchen. There was an obstructed admittance on that side also, and at the door sat my old friend Nellie Dean, sewing and singing a song, which was often interrupted from within by harsh words of scorn and intolerance, uttered in a far from musical accents. I'd rather by the half have 'em swearing lowercase I, my lugs fro, mourn to neat, nor hearken ye high siver. I hate this, said the tenant of the kitchen, in answer to an unheard speech of Nellie's. Oh, it's a blazing shame that I cannot open the blessed book, but set them up glories to Satan, and all tie flaysome wickedness that I'ver been born into the world. Oh, ye right nout, and choose another, and that poor lad'll be lost atween ye. Poor lad, he added with a groan, he's witched, and I'm sartin on't. O Lord, judge 'em, for there's another law nor justice among were rollers. Now, or we should be sitting and flaming, it's the F word, derogatory term for homosexual people, but it's used in the term for a bundle of sticks, and I don't feel comfortable saying it. I suppose, retorted the singer, but wished, old man, and read your Bible like a Christian, and never mind me. This is Fairy Annie's wedding, a bonny tune, and it goes to dance. Miss Dean was about to recommence when I advanced and recognized me directly. Oh, she jumped to her feet, crying, why, bless you, Mr. Lockwood. Oh, how would you think of returning in this way? All shut up at Thrushcross Grange. Oh, you should have given us notice. I've arranged to be accommodated there for as long as I shall stay, I answered. I depart again tomorrow. And how are you transplanted here, Miss Dean? Tell me that. Zilla left, said Mr. Heathcliff, wished to have me come soon after you went to London. And stay till you return. But step in, pray. Have you walked? from Gimmerton this evening?" "From the Grange," I replied, "and while they make me lodging room there, I want to finish my business with your master, because I don't think of having another opportunity in a hurry." "What business, sir?" said Nellie, conducting me into the house. "He's gone out at present, won't return soon." "About the rent," I answered. "Oh, then it is with Mrs. Heathcliff you must settle," she observed, or rather with me. "She has not learnt to manage her affairs yet, and I act for her. There's nobody else." I looked surprised. You have not heard of Heathcliff's death, I see," she continued. "Heathcliff's dead?" I exclaimed, astonished. "Oh, how long ago?" 3 months since, but sit down, let me take your hat, and I'll tell you all about it." "Stop, you've had nothing to eat, have you?" "Oh, I want nothing. I have ordered supper at home. You sit down, too. I've never dreamt of his dying." "Let me hear how it came to pass. You say you don't expect them back for some time. The young people?" "No, I have to scold them every evening for their late rambles, but they don't care for me. At least have a drink of our old ale. I'll do you good. You seem weary." She hastened to fetch it before I could refuse, and I heard Joseph asking whether it warn't a crying scandal that she should have followers at her time of life, and then go get them jocks out. To Meister's cellar. He fair shammed to bid well and see it. I hate that, shammed with 2 A's. She did not stay to retaliate, but re-entered in a minute, bearing a reaming silver pint, whose contents I lauded with becoming earnestness. And afterwards she furnished me with the sequel of Heathcliff's history. He had a queer end, as she expressed it. Well, I was summoned to Wuthering Heights. "Within a fortnight of you leaving us," she said, and I obeyed joyfully, for Catherine's sake. My first interview with her grieved and shocked me. She had altered so much since our separation. Mr. Heathcliff did not explain his reasons for taking a new mind about my coming here. He only told me he wanted me, and that he was tired of seeing Catherine. I must make the little parlor my sitting room, and keep her with me. It was enough if he were obliged to see her once or twice a day. She seemed pleased at this arrangement, and by degrees I smuggled over a great number of books and other articles that informed her amusement at the Grange, and flattered myself that we should get on in tolerable comfort. The delusion did not last long. Catherine, contented at first in a brief space, grew irritable and restless. For one thing, she was forbidden to move out of the garden, and it fretted her so sadly to be confined to its narrow bounds as spring drew on. For another, in following the house, I was forced to quit her frequently, and she complained of loneliness, and she preferred quarreling with Joseph in the kitchen to sitting at peace in her solitude. I did not mind their skirmishes, but Hareton was often obliged to seek the kitchen also. And when the master wanted to have the house to himself, and though in the beginning she either laughed at his approach or quietly joined in my occupations, and shunned remarking on addressing him, and though he was always as sullen and silent as possible, after a while she changed her behavior and became incapable of letting him alone, talking at him, commenting on his stupidity and idleness, expressing her wonder at how he could endure the life he lived, and how he could sit a whole evening staring into the fire and dozing. "He's just like a dog, is he not, Ellen?" she once observed. Or a cart horse? He does not work, eats his food, and sleeps eternally. What a blank, dreary mind he must have. Do you ever dream, Hareton? And if you do, what's it about? You can't speak to me." Then she looked at him. He would rather open his mouth or nor look again. He's perhaps dreaming now," she continued. He twitched his shoulder as Juno twitches hers. "Ask him, Ellen. Mr. Hareton, will you ask the master to send you upstairs, and if you don't behave," I said. He will not only twitched his shoulder, but clenched his fist as if tempted to use it. "I know why Hareton never speaks. When I'm in the kitchen," she exclaimed on another occasion, "he's afraid I shall laugh at him. Ellen, what do you think? I began teaching himself to read once, and because I laughed, he burned his books and dropped it. Was he not a fool? Were not you naughty?" That was weird. That's a weird little sentence structure there. I said, "Answer me that." Perhaps I was, she went on, but I did not expect him to be so silly. Hareton, if I gave you a book, would you take it now? I'll try. She placed one, and she'd been perusing on her hand, and he flung it off and muttered if she did not give over, he would break her neck. Well, I shall put it here, she said, in the table drawer, and I'm going to bed. Then she whispered me to watch whether he touched it, and departed. But he would not come near it, and I was so informed her in the morning, and to her great disappointment, I saw that she was sorry for his preserving skulkiness and indolence, and in consequence reproved her for fighting him off for improving himself. She had done it effectually, but her ingenuity was at work to remedy the injury. So while I ironed or perused other such stationary employments, as I could not do well with the parlor, she would bring some pleasant volume and read it aloud to me. When Hareton was there, she generally paused in an interesting part and left the book lying about. That she did repeatedly. But she was as obstinate as a mule, and instead of snatching at her bait in wet weather, he took to smoking with Joseph. And they sat like automatons, one on each side of the fire, the elder happily too deaf to understand her wicked nonsense, as he would have called it, the younger doing his best to seem to disregard it. And on fine evenings, the latter followed his shooting expectations, and Catherine yawned and sighed, and teased me to talk to her, and ran off into the court garden the moment I began, and as last resource, cried. Oh, and said she was tired of living, and her life was useless. Mr. Heathcliff, who grew more and more disinclined to society, had almost banished Earnshaw from his apartment. Owing to an accident at the commencement of March, he became, for some days, a fixture in our kitchen. His gun burst out while on the hills by himself, and a splinter cut his arm, and he lost a good deal of blood before he could reach home. The consequence was that, perforce, he was condemned to the fireside and tranquility. Till he made it up again, it suited Catherine to have him there at any rate, made her hate her room upstairs more than ever, and she would compel me to find out business below, that she might accompany me. On Easter Monday, Joseph went to Gimmerton Fair with some cattle, and in the afternoon I was busy getting up linen burp in the kitchen. Earnshaw sat, morose as usual, at the chimney corner, and my little mistress was beguiling an idle hour with drawing pictures on the window panes, varying her amusement by smothered bursts of songs and whispered ejaculations, and quick glances of annoyance and impatience in the direction of her cousin, who steadfastly smoked and looked into the grate. At a notice that I could do with her no longer intercepting my light, she removed to the hearthstone, and I bestowed little attention on her proceedings. But presently I heard her begin. I found out, Hareton, that I'm glad that I should like you to be my cousin now, if you had not grown so cross with me and so rough. Oh, Hareton returned no answer. Hareton, exclamation point, do you hear? She continued. Get off with ye, he growled, in uncompromising gruffness. Let me take that pipe, she said, cautiously advancing her hand and abstracting it from his mouth. Before he could attempt to recover it, it was broken. Oh, and behind the fire. He swore at her and seized another. What the hell? So she's trying to make nice with him about making fun of him for reading, and her way of doing it is to sit down next to him and just nag him and then take his pipe and break it and throw it in the fire. She's like an animal. Stop, she cried. You must listen to me first, and I can't speak while these clouds are floating in my face. Will you go to the devil? He exclaimed ferociously, and let me be. No, she persisted, I won't. I can't tell what to do to make you talk to me, and you are determined not to understand. When I call you stupid, I don't mean anything. I don't mean that I despise you. I come. You shall take notice of me. Hareton, you're my cousin, and you shall own me. What the hell's going on? I shall have naught to do with ye. You and your muck pride and your damned mocking tricks, he answered. I'll go to hell, body and soul, before I look sideways after you again. Side out of the gate now, this minute. Well, Catherine frowned, retreated to the window seat to chew her lip, and endeavoring by humming an eccentric tune to conceal a growing tendency to sob. Oh, you should be friends with your cousin, Mr. Hareton, I interrupted, since she repents of her sauciness. Oh, and I should do you a great deal of good. It would make you another man to have her for a companion. They're not talking about getting married. What's with all the... Nobody leaves their house and your only option is to marry your cousins, this is getting so gross. I mean, they're years old and they barely leave the house. A companion, he cried. Oh, and she hates me and does not think me fit to wipe her shoon. What's a shoon, a butt? Let's see. Let's find out what a shoon is. It's Japanese. It's a role-playing video game. Nope, that's no good. All right, we're not doing that. Okay, well, we'll never know what shoon means. Nay, if it made me a king, I'd be scorned for seeking her goodwill anymore. Oh, it's not I who hate you. It is you who hate me, wept Kathy, no longer distinguishing her trouble. Oh, you hate me as much as Mr. Heathcliff does, and more. You damned liar, began Earnshaw. Why have I made him angry by taking your part then 100 times? And that when you sneered at and despised me and go on plaguing me, I'll step in yonder and say you worried me out of the kitchen. Well, I didn't know you took my part, she answered, drying her eyes. And I was miserable and bitter at everyone. But now I thank you and beg you to forgive me. What can I do besides? She returned to the hearth and frankly extended her hand. He blackened and scowled like a thundercloud and kept his fists resolutely clenched, and his gaze fixed on the ground. Catherine, by instinct, must have divined it to be an obstinate perversity, and not dislike, that prompted this dogged conduct. For, after remaining an instant undecided, she stooped and impressed on his cheek a gentle kiss. The little rogue thought I had not seen her, and drawing back, she took her former station by the window quite demurely. And I shook my head reprovingly. And then she blushed and whispered, well, what should I have done, Ellen? He wouldn't shake hands and he wouldn't look. I must show him some way that I like him and that I want to be friends. Whether the kiss convinced Hareton, I cannot tell. He was very careful for some minutes that his face should not be seen. And when he did raise it, he was sadly puzzled where to turn his eyes. Catherine employed herself in wrapping a handsome book neatly in white paper, and having tied it with a bit of ribbon and addressed it to Mr. Hareton Earnshaw, she desired me to be her ambassadress and convey the present to its destined recipient. And tell him, if he'll take it, I'll come and teach him to read it right, she said. And if he'll refuse it, I'll go upstairs and never tease him again. I carried it and repeated the message, anxiously watched by my employer. Hareton would not open his fingers, so I laid it on his knee, and he did not strike it off either, and I returned to my work. Catherine leaned her head and arms on the table till she heard the slight rustle of the covering being removed, and then she stole away and quietly seated herself beside her cousin. Oh, he trembled, and his face glowed. All his rudeness and all his surly harshness had deserted him, and he could not summon courage at first to utter a syllable in reply to her questioning look and her murmured petition. Say you forgive me, Hareton, do. Oh, you can make me so happy by speaking that little word. I muttered something inaudible. And you'll be my friend, added Catherine interrogatively. I can say it. Nay, you'll be ashamed of me every day of your life, he answered. And I'm more ashamed the more you know me, and I cannot abide it. So you won't be my friend, she said, smiling as sweet as honey, and creeping close up. I overheard no further distinguishable talk, but on looking round again, I perceived two such radiant countenances bent over the page and accepted the book, that I did not doubt the treaty had been ratified on both sides, and the enemies were thenceforth sworn allies. Oh, the work they studied was full of costly pictures, and those other position had charm enough to keep them unmoved till Joseph came home. He, poor man, was perfectly aghast at the spectacle of Catherine seated on the same bench with Hareton Earnshaw, leaning her hand on his shoulder. And confounded at his favorite's endurance of her proximity. It affected him too deeply to allow an observation on the subject that night. His emotion was only revealed by the immense sighs he drew, and he solemnly spread his large Bible on the table and overlaid it with dirty banknotes from his pocketbook and produced of the day's transactions. At length he summoned Hareton from his seat. Tack these into to maester, lad, he said, and bide there, eyes gang up to my own ram. This holy's neither mensful nor seeming us. We mun side out and see each other. Another whatever. Come, Catherine, I said, we must side out, in quotes, too. I've done my ironing. Are you ready to go? It's not 8 o'clock, she answered, raising unwillingly. Hareton, I'll leave this book upon the chimney-piece, and I'll bring some more tomorrow. Only books that you have, I shall talk to Tallahassee, Hahse. House? I don't know. I hate this, said Joseph. And it'll be Mitch if ya find him again, soa ya may plaz Yarslin. I hate this. Kathy threatened that his library should pay for hers, and smiling as she passed Hareton, went upstairs singing, lighter of heart, I venture to say, than ever she had been under that roof before, except that perhaps during her earliest visits to Linton. The intimacy thus commenced grew rapidly, though it encountered temporary interruptions. Earnshaw was not to be civilized with a wish, and my young lady was no philosopher, and no paragon of patience, but both their minds tending to the same point, one loving and desiring to esteem, and the other loving and desiring to be esteemed. They contrived in end to reach it. You see, Mr. Lockwood, it was easy enough to win Miss Heathcliff's heart, but now I'm glad you did not try. Oh, he was trying. I wasn't just making that up. The crown of all my wishes will be on the union of those two. I shall envy no one on their wedding day. There won't be a happier woman than myself in England. To see two cousins get married. Two cousins that barely ever leave the house. They basically don't know what other humans are like. All right, chapter 33. On the morrow of that Monday, Earnshaw, being still unable to follow his ordinary employments and therefore remaining about the house, I speedily found it would be impractical to retain my charge beside me, as heretofore. She had downstairs before me and out into the garden where she had seen her cousin performing some easy work. And when I went to bid him come breakfast, I saw he had persuaded them to clear a large space of ground from currant and gooseberry bushes. And they were busy planning together an importation of plants from the Grange. I was terrified at the devastation which had been accomplished in a brief half hour. The black currant trees were the apple of Joseph's eye, and she had just fixed her choice of a flower bed in the midst of them. There! That'll be all shown to the master, I exclaimed, the minute it's discovered. And what excuse have you to offer for taking such liberties in the garden? We shall have a fine explosion on the head of it. See if we don't, Mr. Hareton. I wonder you should have no more wit than to go and make that mess at her bidding. Why, I forgot they were Joseph's, answered Earnshaw, rather puzzled. But I'll tell him I did it. We always ate our meals with Mr. Heathcliff, and I held the mistress's post in making tea and carving. So I was indispensable at the table. Catherine usually sat by me, but today she stole near to Hareton. And I presently saw that she would have no more discretion in their friendship than she had in her hostility. Now mind you, don't talk with such notice your cousins too much. Were my whispered instructions as we entered the room. It will certainly annoy Mr. Heathcliff. He'll be mad at you both. I'm not going to, she answered. In the minute after, she had sidled to him and was sticking primroses in his plate of porridge. Why would you do that? Is that your way of flirting? It's so weird. He dared not speak to her there. He dared hardly look. And yet, she went on teasing, till he was twice on the point of being provoked to laugh. And I frowned as she glanced toward the master, whose mind was occupied on other subjects than his company. And his countenance evinced and she grew serious for an instant, scrutinizing him with deep gravity. Afterwards, she turned and recommenced her nonsense. At last, Hareton uttered a smothered laugh. Mr. Heathcliff started. His eye rapidly surveyed our faces. Catherine met it with her accustomed look of nervousness and yet defiance, which he abhorred. It's well that you're out of my reach, he exclaimed. What fiend possessed you to stare back at me continually with those infernal eyes? Down with them, and don't remind me of your existence again. I thought I cured you of laughing. It was me, muttered Hareton. What'd you say? Demanded the master. Hareton looked at his plate, did not repeat the confession. Mr. Heathcliff looked at him a bit, and then silently resumed his breakfast and interrupted musing. We had nearly finished, and the two young people prudently shifted wider asunder, so I anticipated no further disturbance during that sitting when Joseph appeared at the door, reveling by his quivering lip and furious eyes that the outrage committed on his precious shrubs was detected. He must have seen Kathy and her cousin about the spot before he examined it, and while his jaws worked like those of a cow, chewing its cud, and rendered his speech difficult to understand, he began. Oh, God damn it. I mun have my wage, and I mun go. I had aimed to de where I starved for 60 year, and thought I lug my books up to the garret, and all my bits o' stuff, and they sud heft kitchen to their slin. For to sake o' quietness, it were hard to gee up my own hearthstone. And I thought I could do that. I hate this so much. But nah, shoes tan my garden fro me, and by the heart, meister, I cannot stand it. Ya may bend to the yoke, and ye will, I known used to. I hate this so much. And the old man doesn't soon get used to new barthrins. I'd rather arn my bite and my sup wee a hammer in the road. Now, idiot, interrupted Heathcliff. Cut it short. What's your grievance, and I'll interfere in no quarrels between you and Nellie. Oh, she may thrust you into the coal hole, for anything I care. It's no Nellie. Oh, I thought he would shut up now, answered Joseph. I shouldn't shift for Nellie, nasty, ill-nout as Shoo is. Thank God, Shoo, in italics, can't stale to sowl o' nobody. Shoo were never so handsome. But what a body mud look at her about winkin'. It's young. He's talking forever. This just goes on. Don't care. So basically, he just likes her. Is the fool drunk? Asked Mr. Heathcliff. Hareton, is it you he's finding fault with? Oh, I pulled up 2 or 3 bushes, replied the young man. But I'm going to set him again. And why have you pulled him up? Said the master. Catherine wisely put in her tongue. We wanted to plant some flowers there, she cried. I'm the only person to blame, for I wished him to it. The devil gave you leave to touch a stick about that place, demanded the father-in-law, much surprised. And who ordered you to obey her? He added, turning to Hareton. The latter was speechless. His cousin replied, Oh, you shouldn't grudge a few yards of earth for me to ornament when you've taken all my land. Your land, insolent slut. God, you never had any, said Heathcliff. And my money, she continued, returning her angry glare, and meantime biting a piece of crust and a remnant of her breakfast. Silence, he exclaimed. Get done and be gone. And Hareton's land and his money, pursued the reckless thing. Hareton and I are friends now, and I shall tell him all about you. Oh, the master seemed confounded for a moment. He grew pale and rose up, eyeing all the while with an expression of mortal hate. Now, if you strike me, Hareton will strike you, she said, so you might as well sit down. Well, if Hareton does not turn you out of the room, I'll strike him to hell, thundered Heathcliff. Damnable witch! Dare you pretend to rouse him against me? Off with her, do you hear? Fling her into the kitchen. Kill her, Ellen Dean, if you let her come into my sight again. Well, Hareton tried, under his breath, to persuade her to go. Drag her away, he cried savagely. Are you trying to talk? And he approached to execute his own command. Well, he'll not obey you, wicked man, any more, said Catherine. Oh, he'll soon detest you as much as I do. Wished, muttered the young man reproachfully. I will not hear you speak to him so. Have done. But you won't let him strike me, she cried. Come then, he whispered earnestly. It was too late. Heathcliff had caught hold of her. Now you go, he said to Earnshaw. Accused accursed witch. This time she has provoked me when I cannot bear it, and I'll make her repent it forever. He had in his hand her hair. Hareton attempted to release her locks, entreating him not to hurt her at once, and Heathcliff's black eyes flashed. Oh, he seemed ready to tear Catherine into pieces, and I just worked up the wrist to come to the rescue when all of a sudden his fingers relaxed. He shifted his grasp from her head to her arm and gazed intently on her face. Then he drew his hand over his eyes and stood for a moment to collect himself, apparently, and turning anew to Catherine, said with assumed calmness, You must learn to avoid putting me in a passion, or shall really murder you sometime. Go with Mrs. Dean and keep her, and confine your insolence to your ears, as to Hareton Earnshaw. If I see him listen to you, I'll send him seeking his bread where he can get it, and your love will make him an outcast and a beggar. Nellie, take her, and leave me. All of you, leave me. I led my young lady out, and she was too glad of her escape to resist. The other followed, and Mr. Heathcliff had his room to himself till dinner, and I had counseled Catherine to dine upstairs. But as soon as she perceived her vacant seat, he sent me to call her. He spoke to none of us, ate very little, and went out directly afterwards, intimating that he should not return before evening. Well, that seems as good a place as any to, go down to the basement and just relax for a little bit. Aren't you tense? It's kind of tense. This book's wrapping up. Things are kind of heating up. Heathcliff's being a even more angry and yet depressed turn, which is really off-putting. Why don't we go down to the basement and relax underneath a couple of naked light bulbs with a folding chair that I have you sit in while I play guitar to you and let you learn about the latest Penguin Random House books. There you are. Take a seat here in this folding chair underneath this naked light bulb while I play this guitar to you. Pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. I've been learning a lot of videos on YouTube. Let me tell you about a new upcoming Random House book called The Road to Roswell by Connie Willis. Oh, you want to learn about The Road to Roswell? Sure. A delightful novel about alien invasions, conspiracies, and, and incredible silly things people are willing to believe, some of which may actually be true, from the Nebula and Hugo award-winning author of Blackout and All Clear. When a level-headed Francie arrives in Roswell, New Mexico for her college roommate's UFO-themed wedding, complete with a true believer and bridegroom, she can't help but roll her eyes at the wide-eyed talk of aliens, which obviously don't exist. Imagine her surprise then when she's abducted by one. Burp. Odder still, her abductor is far from what the popular media have led her to expect, with a body like a tumbleweed and a mass of lightning-fast tentacles. What, for real? Nor is Francie the only victim of the alien's abduction spree. Before long, he has acquired a charming con man named Wade, a sweet little old lady with a casino addiction, a retiree with a huge RV and a love for old westerns, and a UFO-chasing nutjob who is thoroughly convinced the alien intends to probe them and or take over the planet. But the more Francie gets to know the alien, the more convinced she becomes that he is not an invader. That he's in trouble and she needs her to help him. Only she doesn't know how or even where the trouble is. Part alien abduction adventure, part road trip saga, part romantic comedy, The Road to Roswell is packed full of men in black, Elvis impersonators, tourist traps, rattlesnakes, chemtrails, and close encounters of the third kind, fourth, and fifth kind. Can Francie, stuck in neon green bridesmaid's dress, save the world and still make it back for the wedding? God, that sounds horrible. That's The Road to Roswell, a novel by Connie Willis. Its category is science fiction romance. Get it for $18 in paperback. Coming out March 26th from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and, you're going to Walmart to walk around and get your giant jug of cheese balls that's like half the size of your whole body, and you're like, what's over there? It's a bunch of people that haven't washed in a while with real slick back, gross, oily hair, and they're like, they're all grabbing with their paws, their meaty paws, just grabbing at this book. Like, what's the book you guys are pawing at? And they're like, shut up, we're just trying to absorb this into our bodies. Like, what's that? And you see that's The Road to Roswell, and you'll find this at the aisles of Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs to the library and continue reading this book? All right, well, you're back. Why don't you get snuggled up? We'll continue where we left off. The two new friends established themselves in the house during his absence, where I heard Hareton sternly check his cousin on her offering a revelation of her father-in-law's conduct to his father. He said he wouldn't suffer a word to be uttered in his disparagement. If he were the devil, it didn't signify. He would stand by him. And he'd rather she would abuse himself as she used to than begin on Mr. Heathcliff. Catherine was waxing cross at this, but he found the means to make her hold her tongue by asking how she would like him to speak ill of her father. Then she comprehended that Earnshaw took the master's reputation home to himself and was attached by ties stronger than Reed's good break. Chains forged by habit, which it would be cruel to attempt to loosen. She showed a good heart, henceforth, in avoiding both complaints and expressions of antipathy concerning Heathcliff, and confessed to me her sorrow that she had endeavored to raise a bad spirit between him and Hareton. Indeed, I don't believe she has ever breathed a syllable in the latter's hearing against her oppressor's sense. When this slight disagreement was over, they were friends again, and as busy as possible in their several occupations of pupil and teacher. I came to sit with them after I'd done my work, and I felt so soothed and comforted to watch them that I did not notice how time got on. They both appeared, in a measure, my children, and I had long been proud one, and now I was sure the other would be a source of equal satisfaction. His honest, warm, and intelligent nature shook off rapidly in the clouds of ignorance and degradation it had been bred, and Catherine's sincere commendations acted as a spur to his industry. His brightening mind brightened his features and added a spirit and nobility to their aspect. I could hardly fancy it the same individual I beheld on the day I discovered my little lady at Wuthering Heights, after her expedition to the crags. While I admired and they labored, dusk drew on, and with it returned the master. He came upon us quite unexpectedly, entering by the front way, and had a full view of the whole three, ere we could raise our heads to glance at him. Well, I reflected that there was ever a pleasanter or more harmless sight, and it would be a burning shame to scold them. The red fire glowed on their two bonny heads and revealed their faces animated with eager interest of children. For though he was 23 and she 18, each had so much of novelty to feel and learn that neither experienced nor evinced their sentiments of sober, disenchanted maturity. They lifted their eyes together to encounter Mr. Heathcliff. Perhaps you've never remarked that their eyes are precisely similar, and they are those of Catherine Earnshaw. The present Catherine has no other likeness to her except a breadth of forehead. What does that mean? And just that she's got a big forehead, or that they have similar foreheads? And a certain arch of the nostril, which makes her appear rather haughty. What? Like her nostrils are flared? Whether she will or not. With Hareton, the resemblance is carried farther. It is singular at times, then it is particularly striking, because his senses are alert, and his mental faculties awakened to unwanted activity. I suppose this resemblance disarmed Mr. Heathcliff as he walked to the hearth in evident agitation, but it quickly subsided as he looked at the young man, or should I say, altered his character, for it was there yet. He took the book from his hand and glanced at the open page, then returned it without any observation. Merely signing Catherine away, her companion lingered very little behind her, and I was about to depart also, but he bid me sit still. That's a poor condition, is it not? He observed, having brooded a while on the scene he had just witnessed. An absurd termination to my violent exertions. I get levers and mattocks to demolish the two houses, and train myself to be capable of working like Hercules. And then everything is ready and in my power. I find the will to lift a slate off either roof has vanished. My old enemies have not beaten me. Now would they be precise time to revenge myself on their representatives. I could do it, but that could hinder me. But was the use. I don't care for striking, and I can't take the trouble to raise my hand. That sounds as if I've been laboring the whole time only to exhibit a fine trait of magnanimity. I could say it. It is far from being the case. I have lost the faculty of enjoying their destruction, and I am too idle to destroy for nothing. Nellie! Oh, there's a strange change approaching. I'm in its shadow at present. I take so little interest in my daily life that I hardly remember to eat and drink. Those two who have left the room are the only objects which retain a distinct material appearance to me, and that appearance causes me pain, amounting to agony. Oh, about her I won't speak. Oh, and I won't desire to think, but I earnestly wish she were invisible. Her presence invokes only a maddening sensation. He moves me differently. And yet if I could do it without seeming insane, I'd never see him again. Oh, you'll perhaps think me rather inclined to become so, he added, making an effort to smile. If I try to describe the thousand forms, past associations and ideas awakens over bodies. But you'll not talk of what I tell you, and my mind is so internally secluded to itself. It's tempting at last to turn it out to another. 5 minutes ago, Hareton seemed a personification of my youth. Oh, not a human being. I felt to him in such a variety of ways that it would have been impossible to have accosted him. Rationally, in the first place, his startling likeness to Catherine connected him fearfully with her. That, however, which you may suppose the most potent to arrest my imagination, is actually the least, for what is not connected with her to me, and what does not recall her. I cannot look down to this floor, but her features are shaped in the flags, in every cloud and in every tree, filling the air at night, and caught by glimpses in every object by day. I am surrounded with her image. The most ordinary faces of men and women, my own features, mock me with a resemblance. Oh, the entire world is a dreadful collection of memoranda that she did exist and that I have lost her. Well, Hareton's aspect was the ghost of my immortal love, of my wild endeavors to hold my right, my degradation, my pride, my happiness, and my anguish. But it is a frenzy to repeat these thoughts to you, only it will let you know why, with reluctance to always be alone. His society is no benefit, rather an aggravation of the constant torment I suffer. Oh, and it partly contributes to render me regardless. Oh, he and his cousin go on together. Oh, I can give them no attention anymore. But what do you mean by a change, Mr. Heathcliff? I asked, alarmed at his manner, though he was neither in danger of losing his senses nor dying, according to my judgment. He was quite strong and healthy, and, to his reason, from childhood, he had a delight in dwelling on dark things and entertaining odd fancies. Oh, he might have had a monomania. What is monomania? I've heard this before. An obsessive enthusiasm for the preoccupation with one thing. Okay, well, now I know what that means. That was a waste of time. I apologize for that. He might have had a monomania on the subject of his departed idol, but on every other point his wits were as sound as mine. I shall not know what till it comes, he said. I'm only half conscious of it now. You had no feeling of illness, have you? I asked. No, Nellie, I have not, he answered. Then you're not afraid of death? I perused. Afraid? No, he replied. I have neither a fear nor a presentiment, nor a hope of death. Why should I? With my hard constitution and temperate mode of living and unperilous occupations, I ought to, and probably shall, remain above ground till there is scarcely a black hair on my head. And yet I cannot continue in this condition! Exclamation point. I've had to remind myself to breathe, almost to remind my heart to beat. Oh, and it's like bending back a stiff spring. It is by compulsion that I do the slightest act not prompted by one thought. And by compulsion that I notice anything alive or dead, which is not associated with one universal idea. I have a single wish, and my whole being and faculties are yearning to attain it. They have yearned toward it for so long and so unwaveringly that I am convinced it will be reached, and soon, because it has devoured my existence. I am swallowed up in anticipation of its fulfillment, and my concessions have not relieved me. But they may account for some otherwise unaccountable phases of humor, which I show. Oh, God, it's a long fight. Oh, I wish we were over. He began to pace the room. muttering terrible things to himself, till I was inclined to believe, as he said Joseph did, that conscience had returned to his heart to an unearthly hell. I wondered greatly how it would end, although he seldom before had revealed this state of mind, even by looks. It was habitual mood. I had no doubt he asserted it himself. Not a soul from the general bearing would have conjectured the fact. You did not know when you saw him, Mr. Lockwood, and at that period of which I speak, it was just the same as then, only fonder of continued solitude, and perhaps still more laconic, laconic. Let's find out how you pronounce that one. I want to say it's laconic. Laconic, I was right the first time. In company. Chapter 34. The final chapter. For some days after that evening, Mr. Heathcliff shunned meeting us at meals, yet he would not consent formally to exclude Hareton and Cathy. He had an aversion to yielding so completely to his feelings, choosing rather to absent himself, and eating once in 24 hours seemed sufficient sustenance for him. One night, after the family were in bed, I heard him go downstairs and out the front door. I did not hear him re-enter, and in the morning I found he was still away. We were in April then, and the weather was sweet, warm, and the grass as green as showers and sun could make it, and 2 dwarf apple trees near the southern wall of the full bloom. After breakfast, Catherine insisted on my bringing a chair and sitting with my work under the fir trees at the end of the house. Verb. Oh, man, I had Subway earlier. I took a break and I got a Subway sandwich. And she beguiled Hareton, who had perfectly recovered from his accident, to dig and arrange in her little garden, which was shifted to that corner by the influence of Joseph's complaints. I was comfortably reveling in the spring fragrance round and the beautiful soft blue overhead when my young lady, who had run down near the gate to procure some primrose roots for her boarder, returned only half laden and informed us that Mr. Heathcliff was coming in, and he spoke to me, she added, with perplexed countenance. What did he say? Asked Hareton. He told me to be gone as fast as I could, she answered, but he looked so different from his usual look that I stopped a moment to stare at him. How? He inquired. Why, almost bright and cheerful. No, almost nothing. Very much excited and wild and glad, she replied. Night walking amuses him, then, I remarked, affecting a careless manner, in reality as surprised as she was, and as anxious to ascertain the truth of her statement, for to see the master looking glad would not be an everyday spectacle. I framed an excuse to go in, and Heathcliff stood at the open door. He was pale, and he trembled. Yet certainly he had a strange, joyful glitter in his eyes, and the altered aspect of his whole face. Will you have some breakfast? I said. You must be hungry, rambling about all night. I wanted to discover where he had been, but I did not like to ask directly. No, I'm not hungry, he answered, averting his head and speaking rather contemptuously as if he guessed I was trying to divine the occasion of his good humor. I felt perplexed. I didn't know whether it were not proper opportunity to offer a bit of admonition. I don't think it's right to wander out of doors, I observed, instead of being in bed. It is not wise, at any rate, this moist season. I dare say you'll catch a bad cold or fever. You have something the matter with you now. Nothing but what I can bear, he replied, and with the greatest pleasure, provided you'll leave me alone. Get in and don't annoy me. Well, I obeyed, and in passing, I noticed he breathed as fast as a cat. As fast as a cat? I've never heard that before. Yes, I reflected to myself, we shall have a fit of illness. I cannot conceive what he's been doing. That noon he sat down to dinner with us and received a heaped-up plate from my hands, as if he intended to make amends for previous fasting. I've neither cold nor fever, Nellie, he remarked, an allusion to my morning speech, and I'm ready to do justice to the food you give me. I took his knife and his fork, and going to commence eating, when the inclination appeared to become suddenly extinct, he laid them on the table and looked eagerly toward the window, then rose and went out. We saw him walking to and fro in the garden while we concluded our meal, and Earnshaw said he'd go and ask why he would not dine, and thought we had grieved him in some way. Well, is he coming? Cried Catherine when her cousin returned. Nay, he answered, but he's not angry. He seems rarely pleased indeed, only I made him impatient by speaking to him twice, and then he bid me to be off to you. He wondered how I would want company of anyone else. I set his plate to keep warm on the fender, and after an hour or two he re-entered when the room was clear, in no degree calmer, the same unnatural. It was unnatural appearance of joy under his black brows. The same bloodless hue in his teeth visible, weird, now and then, in a kind of smile, his frame shivering, not as one shivers with chill or weakness, but as tight stretched cord vibrates, a strong thrilling rather than trembling. Oh, I will ask what is the matter, I thought, or should I? And I exclaimed, have you heard any news, Mr. Heathcliff? You look so uncommonly animated. Where should the good news come from me? He said. I'm animated with hunger, and seemingly I must not eat. Well, your dinner's here, I returned. Why don't you get it? Well, I don't want it now, he muttered hastily. I'll wait till the supper. And Nellie, once for all, let me beg you to warn Hareton and the other away from me. I wish to be troubled by nobody, and I wish to have this place to myself. Is there some new reason for his banishment? I inquired. Tell me why you are so queer, Mr. Heathcliff. Where were you last night? And I'm not putting the question through idle curiosity, but you're putting the question through very idle curiosity, he interrupted with a laugh. Yeah, I'll bet I'll answer it. Last night I was on the threshold of hell. Today I am within sight of my heaven, and I have my eyes on it, hardly 3 feet, to sever me, and now you better go. You'll neither see nor hear anything to frighten you if you refrain from prying. Having swept the hearth and wiped the table, I departed more perplexed than ever. He did not quit the house again that afternoon, and no one intruded on its solitude till 8 o'clock. I deemed it proper, though unsummoned, to carry a candle and his supper to him. He is leaning against the ledge of an open lattice, but not looking out. His face was turned to the interior gloom. The fire had smoldered to ashes, and the room was filled with the damp, mild air of the cloudy evening, and so still that not only a murmur of that beck-down Gimmerton was distinguishable, but its ripples and its gurgling over the pebbles, as though large stones could not cover. I uttered an ejaculation of discontent at seeing the dismal grate, and commenced shuttering the casements, one after another, until I came to his. Must I close this? I asked, in order to rouse him, for he would not stir. The light flashed on his features as I spoke. Oh, Mr. Lockwood, I cannot express what a terrible start I've got by a momentary view. Those deep black eyes, that smile and ghastly paleness. It appeared to me, not Mr. Heathcliff, but a goblin. Oh, and in my terror, I let a candle bend toward the wall, and it left me in darkness. Yeah, close it, he replied in his familiar voice. There, that is pure awkwardness. Why did you hold the candle horizontally? Be quick and bring another. I hurried out in a foolish state of dread, and said to Joseph, the master wishes you to take him a light and rekindle the fire, for I dare not go in by myself again just then. Joseph rattled some fire into the shovel and went. But he brought back immediately with the supper tray in his other hand, complaining that Mr. Heathcliff was going to bed, and he wanted nothing to eat till morning. We heard him mount the stairs directly. He did not proceed to his ordinary chamber, but turned into that with the paneled bed. Its window, as I mentioned before, is wide enough for anyone to get through, and it struck me that he plotted another midnight excursion, of which we had no suspicion. Burp, is the ghoul or a vampire? I mused. I had read of such hideous incarnate demons, and I had then set myself to reflect on how I had tended him in infancy, and watched him grow to youth, and followed him almost through the whole course. And what absurd nonsense it was to yield to that sense of horror. But where did it come from? A little dark thing? Harbored by a good man to his bane, muttered superstition as I dozed in unconsciousness, and I began half-dreaming to weary myself with the imagining of some fit parentage for him, and, repeating my waking meditations, I tracked his existence over again with grim variations at last, picturing his death and funeral, of which all I can remember is being exceedingly vexed at having the task of dictating an inspection of his monument and consulting with the sexton about it. And as he had no surname and we could not tell his age, we were obliged to content ourselves with a single word, Heathcliff. That came true, we were. If you enter in the kirkyard, you'll read it on his headstone. Only that, and the date of his death. Dawn restored me to common sense. I rose and went to the garden, and as soon as I could see to ascertain if there were any footmarks under his window, there were none. He has stayed at home, I thought, and he'll be all right today. And I prepared breakfast for the household, as is my usual custom, and told Hareton and Catherine to get theirs ere the master come down, as he lay late. They preferred taking it out of doors under the trees, and I set a little table to accommodate them. On my re-entrance, I found Mr. Heathcliff below. He and Joseph, this guy will never die, were conversing about some farming business, and he gave clear, minute directions concerning the matter discussed, and he spoke rapidly and turned his head continually aside, and had the same excited expression, even more exaggerated. When Joseph quitted the room, he took a seat in the place he generally chose, and I put a basin of coffee before him. I drew it near, and then rested his arms on the table, and looked at the opposite wall, as I supposed, surveying one particular portion up and down, and glittering restless eyes, and with such eager interest that he stopped breathing during half a minute altogether. "Oh, come now," I exclaimed, pushing some bread against his hand. "Eat and drink that while it's hot. It's been waiting nearly an hour." He didn't notice me, and yet he smiled. Oh, I'd rather have seen him gnash his teeth than smile so. "Mr. Heathcliff, master," I cried, "don't, for God's sake, stare as if you saw an unearthly vision." "Don't for God's sake shout so loud," he replied. "Turn round and tell me, are we by ourselves?" "Of course," is my answer. "Of course we are." Still, I involuntarily obeyed him, as if I were not quite sure. And with the sweep of his hand, he cleared a vacant space in front amongst the breakfast things and leaned forward to gaze more at his ease. Now I perceived he was not looking at the wall, for when I regarded him alone, it seemed exactly when he gazed at something within 2 yards' distance, and whatever it was, it communicated apparently both pleasure and pain in exquisite extremes. At last, the anguished, yet raptured expression of his countenance suggested that idea. The fancied object was not fixed either. His eyes perused it with unwearied diligence, and even in speaking to me, were never weaned away. I vainly reminded him of his protracted abstinence from food. If he stirred to touch anything in compliance with my entreaties, if he stretched his hand out to get a piece of bread, his fingers clenched before they reached it, and remained on the table, forgetful of their aim. I sat, a model of patience, trying to attract his absorbed attention from its engrossing speculation till he grew irritable and got up, asking why I would not allow him to have it his own time and his own meals, and saying that on the next occasion I needn't wait. I might set things down and go. Having uttered these words, he left the house, slowly sauntered down the garden path, and disappeared through the gate. Well, the hours crept anxiously by. Another evening came, and I did not retire to rest till late, and when I did not sleep. He returned after midnight. Oh, God, this guy won't die. And instead of going to bed, shut himself into his room beneath, and I listened and tossed about, and finally dressed and descended. It was too irksome to lie there, harassing my brain with 100 idle misgivings. I distinguished Mr. Heathcliff's step, restlessly measuring the floor as he frequently broke the silence by deep inspiration, resembling a groan, and he muttered detached words also. The only one which I could catch was the name of Catherine, coupled with some wild term of endearment or suffering, and spoken as one would speak to a person present, low and earnest, and wrung from the depth of his soul. I had not courage to walk straight into the apartment, but I desired to divert him from his reverie, and therefore fell foul of the kitchen fire, stirred it, and began to scrape the cinders. Oh, it drew him forth sooner than I expected. He opened the door immediately and said, "Nellie, come here. Is it morning? Come in with your light." "It's striking 4, I answered. "You want a candle to take upstairs? You might have lit one at this fire." "No, I don't wish to go upstairs," he said. "Come in and kindle me a fire, and do anything there is to do about my room." "I must blow the coals red first before I can carry any," I replied, getting the chair of the bellows. He roamed to and fro, meantime in a state approaching distraction, his heavy sighs succeeding each other so thick as to leave no space for common breathing between. "When day breaks, I'll send for Green," he said. "I wish to make some legal inquiries of him, while I can bestow a thought on these matters, and while I can act calmly. Oh, I've not written my will yet, and now, to leave my property, I cannot determine. I wish I could annihilate it from the face of the earth. Well, I would not talk so, Mr. Heathcliff," I interposed. Let me you be a while. You'll be spared to repent of your many injustices yet. I never expected your nerves would be be disordered. They are at present marvelously so. However, and almost entirely through your own fault, the way you've passed these last 3 days might knock up a titan. What does that mean? Do take some food and some repose. You need only look yourself in a glass to see how you require both. Your cheeks are hollow. Your eyes are bloodshot like a person starving with hunger and going blind with loss of sleep. Oh, it's not my fault I can't eat or rest, he replied. I assure you, though it's no settled designs, I'll do both, as soon as I possibly can. But you might as well bid a man struggling in the water rest within arm's length of the shore. I must reach it first, and then I'll rest. Well, never mind, Mr. Green, as to repenting of my injustices. I've done no injustice, and I repent of nothing. Oh, I'm too happy, and yet I'm not happy enough. Oh, my soul's bliss kills my body, but it does not satisfy itself. Happy, master? I cried. Strange happiness. If you would hear me without being angry, I might offer some advice that would make you happier. How's that? He asked. Give it. Well, you are aware, Mr. Heathcliff, I said, that from the time that you were 13 years old, you lived a selfish, unchristian life. You probably hardly had a Bible in your hands during all that period. You must have forgotten its contents of the book. You may not have space to search it now. It could be hurtful to send for someone, some minister or any denomination, it doesn't matter which, to explain it and show you how very far you've erred from its precepts and how unfit you are for its heaven, unless a change takes place before you die. Well, I'm rather obliged then. Angry, Nellie, he said, for you remind me of the manner in which I desire to be buried. It is to be carried to the churchyard in the evening. You and Hareton may, if you please, accompany me, and mind particularly to notice that the sexton obeys my directions concerning the 2 coffins. No minister need come. Oh, that's right, he wants to take part in one of the coffins so he can hold hands under the earth with Catherine. No minister need come, nor need anything be said over me. I tell you, I have nearly attained my heaven, and that the others is altogether unvalued and uncoveted by me. And supposing you preserved in your obstinate fast, and died by that means, and they refused to bury you in the precincts of the kirk, I said, shocked at his godless indifference, how would you like it? Oh, they won't do that, he replied, and if they did, you must have me removed, secretly, and if you neglect it, you shall prove practically that the dead are not annihilated. As soon as he heard the other members of the family stirring, he retired to his den, and I breathed freer. But in the afternoon, while Joseph and Hareton were at their work, he came into the kitchen again with a wild look, bid me come and sit in the house. He wanted somebody with him, and I declined, telling him plainly that his strange talk and manner frightened me, and I had neither the nerve nor the will to be his companion alone. I believe you think me a fiend, he said with his dismal laugh, as something too horrible to live under a decent roof. Then, turning to Catherine, who was there, and drew behind me at his approach, burp, he added, half sneeringly, will you come, Chuck? I'll not hurt you. No, to you I've made myself worse than the devil. Well, there is one who won't shrink from my company. By God, she's relentless. Oh, damn it. Oh, unutterably too much for flesh and blood to bear. Even mine. He solicited the society of no one more. At dusk he went into his chamber. Through the whole night and far into the morning we heard him groaning and murmuring to himself. Hareton was anxious to enter, but I bid him fetch Mr. Kenneth, and he should go in and see him. When he came, I requested admittance and tried to open the door, and I found it locked, and Heathcliff bid us be damned. Oh, he was better and wouldn't be left alone, so the doctor went away. The following evening was very wet. Indeed, it poured down till day dawn. What's day dawn? And as I looked, as I took my morning walk round the house, I observed the master's window swinging open, and the rain driving straight in. I cannot be in bed, I thought. Those showers would drench him through, so he must either be up or out. But I'll make no more ado, and I'll go boldly and look. Having succeeded in obtaining entrance with another key, I ran to unclose the panels, for the chamber was vacant. Quickly pushing them aside, I peeped in, and Mr. Heathcliff was there, laid on his back. Oh, his eyes met mine so keen and fierce. I started, and then he seemed to smile, and I could not think him dead, but his face and throat were washed with rain. The bedclothes dripped, and he's perfectly still. The lattice, flapping to and fro, had grazed one hand that rested on the sill. No blood trickled from his broken skin, and when I put my fingers to it, I could no doubt do more. He was dead and stark. I hasped the window, combed his long black hair from his forehead, and tried to close his eyes to extinguish, if possible, that frightful, lifelike gaze of exultation before anyone else beheld it. But they would not shut. Oh, they seemed to sneer at my attempts. And his parted lips and sharp white teeth sneered too. Taken with another fit of cowardice, I cried out for Joseph. Joseph shuffled up and made a noise, but resolutely refused to meddle with them. Oh, God, not this guy. The devil's harried off his soul, he cried, and he may have his carcass into to bargain for aught I care. What a wicked un he looks, gurning at death. And the old sinner grinned in mockery. I thought he intended to cut a caper around the bed, but suddenly composing himself, he fell on his knees and raised his hands, and returned thanks to that lawful master in ancient stock that restored to their rights. I felt stunned at the awful event. My memory unavoidably recurred to former times with sort of oppressive sadness. But poor Hareton, the most wronged, was the only one who really suffered much. He sat by the corpse all night, weeping in bitter earnest. And he pressed his hand and kissed the sarcastic, savage face, that's got to look weird, with everyone else shrank from in contemplating, and bemoaned him with such strong grief which springs naturally from a generous heart, though it be as tough as tempered steel. Mr. Kenneth was perplexed to pronounce of what disorder the master died, and I concealed the fact of his having swallowed nothing for 4 days, fearing it might lead to trouble, and then I am persuaded he did not abstain on purpose. Oh, it was the consequence of a strange illness, not the cause. Oh, we buried him, to the scandal of the whole neighborhood, as he wished. Earnshaw and I, the sexton, and 6 men to carry the coffin, comprehended the whole attendance. The 6 men, departed when they let down into the grave, and we stayed to see it covered. Hareton, with a streaming face, dug green sods and laid them over the brown mold himself. At present, it is as smooth as the verdant with its companion mounds, and I hope its tenant sleeps as soundly. But the country folks, if you ask them, would swear on the Bible that he walks. There are those who speak of having met him near the church and on the moor, and even within the house, idle tales, you'll say, and so say I. Yet that old man by the kitchen fire affirms he has seen two on him looking out of his chamber window every rainy night since his death. And an odd thing happened to me about a month ago. I was going to the Grange one evening, a dark evening, threatening thunder, and then just at the turn of the heights, I encountered a little boy with his sheep and 2 lambs before him. He's crying terribly, and I suppose the lambs are skittish and would not be guided. What's the matter, my little man? I asked. There's Heathcliff and a woman yonder, under to nab, he blubbered. I daren't pass 'em. Well, I saw nothing, but neither the sheep nor he would go on, so I bid him take the road lower down. He probably raised the phantoms from thinking as he traversed the moors alone on the nonsense that he heard his parents' companions repeat. Yet still, I don't like being out in the dark now, and I don't like being left by myself in this grim house. I cannot help it. I shall be glad when they leave it to shift the Grange. They're going to the Grange, then? I asked. Yes, answered Mrs. Dean, as soon as they're married, and that'll be on New Year's Day. And then who'll live here then? Why, Joseph will take care of the house, perhaps a lad to keep him company. When they live in the kitchen, and the rest will be shut up. For use of such ghosts as to choose that inhabited, I observed. No, Mr. Lockwood, said Nellie, shaking her head. I believe the dead are at peace, but it is not right to speak of them with levity. And at that moment the garden gate swung to. The ramblers were returning. They are afraid of nothing, I grumbled, watching their approach to the window. Together they would brave Satan and all his legions. And as they stepped onto the door-stones and halted to take a last look at the moon, or more correctly at each other by their light, I felt irresistibly impelled to escape them again, because he missed his chance. He's all jealous. And pressing a remembrance into the hand of Mrs. Dean and disregarding her explanations of rudeness, I wished to the kitchen as they opened the house door, and so should have confirmed Joseph in his opinion of his fellow servant's gay indiscretions. had he not fortunately recognized me for a respectable character by the sweet ring of sovereign at his feet. My walk home was lengthened by a diversion in the direction of the kirk, when beneath its walls I perceived decay and made progress. Even in the 7 months, many a window showed black gaps derived with glass, and slates jutted off here and there beyond the right line of the roof, to be gradually worked off in the coming autumn storms. I sought and soon discovered the 3 headstones on the slope next to the moor, the middle one gray and half buried in heath. Edgar Linton's only harmonized by the turf and moss creeping up its foot, and Heathcliff's still bare. Oh, I lingered around them, under the benign sky, watched the moths fluttering along the heath and harebells, and listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. Well, that's the end of that, Claptrap. Why don't we head down to the smoking room, where we can sit back, relax, and enjoy a cigarette, and talk about the book we just read. Now, there you are. Why don't you take a seat? I have a lot to say about this book, and I don't have much time to say it. I gotta hurry through this as fast as I can. So just take a seat and shut the hell up. Oh, god damn it. My wife put these birds here in the smoking room. Doesn't make much sense. Let's not do the cute stuff right now. Let's just get into this. God, I got a lot to say. This is a story of how abuse can create hate in people that can grow and become infectious to the others around them. Heathcliff was brought into this family when no one else wanted him, as far as I know. Apparently, this was based on Emily Bronte's great-grandfather, Hugh Brontë, finding a street urchin when on a trip to London with his wife and bringing him back to be part of the family. So Heathcliff already has learned not to trust others and use cruelty and distrust as a form of protection. So when he meets Catherine, who's also cruel, though we don't really know why, at least that I paid attention to when I was reading this, he is drawn to her, and he feels love for her early in his life. And his love for her serves as an emotional escape from the cycle of abuse and hate that he's lived in. Then there's Hindley, who's jealous of Heathcliff, is favored by his father. This hints at the kind of emotional abuse felt by his father, where he's never good enough. So then Heathcliff is suddenly being raised up as a special member of the family. He is instantly takes advantage of his father's death to make Heathcliff a servant to the grounds. So this makes Heathcliff resentful because now he can't marry Catherine because of the social standards, and he spends the rest of the book torturing everyone around him. Unhelpfully, Catherine keeps kind of playing with him in this way, where she shows him affection, though she can't commit to, now that she's married off, which drives Heathcliff crazy as he waits for anything to play out where the two could be together. And when she dies, he's driven even further into his furious madness because he can never be with her. Heathcliff is more or less left with the children of the people in his life that have made him miserable after they've all died and there's just the kids there. So he poisons them to make them as miserable as himself. Cathy, the child of Catherine, seems dead set on breaking the curse at first. Oh, she's like her mother in being headstrong and mostly cruel. She gets romantically involved with Heathcliff's son, not because she loves him, as far as I can tell when I was reading it, but because she has to settle for him because she lives in this mansion in the middle of nowhere, and all you can do is just marry your cousin. So she settles for him as the only eligible man in this remote area. Also, more importantly, she wants to use him as a way to get to Heathcliff, showing some kind of true love and happiness to drive Heathcliff crazy. But when her husband dies, because he's so sickly and annoying, Heathcliff wins by grounding her down into his own depression, so that she's barking at Hareton and everyone else in her misery. But thanks to Lockwood being some kind of beacon of sanity in this story, she eventually decides to stop crapping on Hareton and marry him so that they can be happy on the grounds after Heathcliff dies. which is weird because Heathcliff's death is also something kind of interesting. We've had him be almost the only character of importance that we follow through the generational phases of this book, besides Nellie and Joseph. But nobody really cares about Joseph. Heathcliff has made everyone miserable, either through design or just living alongside them. But when he dies, there's nothing really all that spectacular about it. He just kind of starts to wander off in the moor and come back talking crazy. And he thinks he sees Catherine sometimes, and he's just a bitter man waiting to die, which seems to take forever. When he does die, it's creepy. He's just like laying in bed with the window open, the rain all over his wet chest, and his eyes are just staring at anyone that walks in this room. Like his teeth are exposed. It's kind of creepy. But otherwise, that's it. For all the pain he's caused, he doesn't really have a big bang that you expect from like modern stories. Then there's the ghost angle. The story starts out with Lockwood having visions of the elder Catherine at the window after reading her diary, and then later on in the book, towards the very end of the book, Heathcliff thinks he hears her at the graveyard when he's digging up her body like a creep, and sees her walking around when no one else can. In the beginning, you think that Catherine's ghost is a real element in the book, but that is forgotten as you go through the family history. And then when it comes around again, it's through the eyes of Heathcliff. I mean, he's so bitterly obsessed that it comes off as just him having hallucinations, not an actual ghost. So that's interesting that Emily decided to drop that or not follow through, kind of taking people's perceptions of what you think this story should be and just kind of wandering off and doing something different, making the ghostly visions more of an obsession of men idolizing her than her actual spirit running around scaring people. One thing that really struck me with this is the life of the people in this kind of environment lived. Did people really live in one house and basically never leave? Like their whole lives? Was it really just normal to be stuck in a house 24 hours a day, years on end, where you never talk to anyone and just marry the only cousin available to you? That would make sense that Kathy kept talking to some kind of idiot, deciding that this is her true love, either to rub it in Heathcliff's face before he died or just to move on with their life. Were there wealthy people living so insulated back then that those kinds of abstract ideas of marriage was normal? Or it's just like, like today, people think, oh, if I'm going to get married, it's because I want to spend my life with this person. Oh, God, I hope that they're the kind of person I can spend my whole life with and not get angry. But in this case, it's just like, you're literally a pawn I can use for this one small goal, which is pissing off this person, or just like, I got to settle down and make a baby at some point. It's really weird. It makes the idea of being wealthy back then kind of trashy. It seems like an average middle-class person today lives far better than them. Like, wealthy people at that time were no different than finding some remote area to build a big house on, and then you call yourself a lord or something, even though no one else really knows you live there or even care. Then there's the Moors in general. That's always talked about. It's romanticized in this book, along with other books, and also like Sherlock Holmes' Hound of the Baskervilles. As an American reading this story, I think that they're like the bayou, like deep, thick, swampy woods, the overgrown trees, and just vines everywhere and stuff. Like, oh God, don't go off the path because then you'll sink into the mud, like along with your horse, suck up a whole horse. But when I looked into it, it's actually a really nice looking fields of flowers and no trees. There's no trees anywhere. So makes it even more weird. There's just these rolling hills of beautiful flowers and reeds and whatever. And that's a nice flower. I want to pick that, and you walk over there to pick it, and you get sucked in, and your pony gets sucked in too, and you both die. But it also looks cute. I couldn't find much information on how people lived in mansions in secluded areas like that, but they really did bury their cousins all the time. Is that a thing? I mean, I know it's a thing in like the deep, deep south of America, but that's also people that live in huts. So these are wealthy, wealthy people that just don't leave the house and they're sickly all the time, just dying left and right. And they're like, that person is the son of my uncle. I will make sex with him. So you can see how death is so common based on Emily Bronte's life that she wrote this into the story. The lifestyle of solitude is kind of hard for me to figure out. And I looked into it and I couldn't find a whole lot about it. So I can't tell if she's just like exaggerating or is that really the way it was back then. Well, Fox wrote a really good article about this that I put in my show notes. So if you care enough to read about how good this story is and how disturbing the story is, go ahead and read that. Well, with that, thanks for listening, and I will figure out what the hell to read next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people. Not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just stay in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.